Week 11 of the fantasy football season, and here's a few quarterbacks I have as sleepers this week. The first guy, Jordan Love of the Green Bay Packers. So Jordan Love, it's been an up and down first season for him as a starter for this Packer team after they traded Aaron Rodgers away to the New York Jets. So Jordan Love, the last few games, he's been in the middle of the pack type of quarterback. Week 8 versus Minnesota, 229 pass yards, a touchdown, INT, 34 rush yards. Week 9 versus the Rams, 228 pass yards, a touchdown. And then last week, week 10 at Pittsburgh, I thought he had a decent game, even though they were playing catch-up. And trailing in that one was his Packer team, 289 pass yards, 2 touchdowns, and 2 INTs. So this week here, a good matchup versus the Chargers. I give up the 4th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. So we saw last week Jared Goff and the Lions go up and down the field all game, dropping 41 points on Charger defense. But I'm not saying Jordan Love's going to go out there and have a huge performance, but if you need a guy to fill in with bye weeks or injuries or a 2-quarterback league, I think you could put in decent numbers, 15, 20 fantasy point range. And right now, he's available still is Jordan Love in 55% of fantasy leagues. Next quarterback, Tommy DeVito of the New York Giants. And Tommy DeVito, obviously, it's a deep dive, available in 97% of fantasy leagues. And last week, he played pretty decent, I believe, in terms of just putting up fantasy numbers. He ran the football pretty well, threw 2 touchdowns. I know it was mostly garbage time, obviously, getting blown out 49-17 to the Dallas Cowboys, but at least he hung in there and showed something with Tommy DeVito. Mentioning DeVito as a sleeper because the Commanders do give up the most fantasy points, believe it or not, to quarterbacks on the season. So we know they traded their 2 pass rushers, Montez Sweat, Chase Young, at the NFL trade deadline. And right now, DeVito and the Giants, it's pretty much an audition here for DeVito to see if he can make this team next season as a backup. Obviously, with Daniel Jones out for the year and Tyrod Taylor possibly out for the season as well. So right now, good matchup. Like I said, worst defense in the league, giving up fantasy points to quarterbacks. And I think DeVito could go out there and be a decent sleeper option in deeper leagues as well. And the third and final quarterback I have as a sleeper is Will Levis of the Tennessee Titans. So Will Levis, he got off to the hot start in his first career start, week 8 versus the Falcons, where he had a monster game, 238 pass yards, 4 touchdowns, 11 rush yards. And now the last 2 weeks, week 9 at Pittsburgh, 262 passing and an INT, but he kept his team in the game and just threw a pick in the end zone tended. And then week 10 at Tampa Bay, just nothing to show for it, 199 pass yards and an INT. So this week, a decent matchup on paper at the Jaguars. I give up the 5th most fantasy points to quarterbacks on the season. But right now, I know Levis is behind one of the worst offensive lines in the NFL is Levis. We know he's got a big arm, no doubt about it, but not many weapons outside of DeAndre Hopkins in the passing game. But right now, well, he's been dropped in tons of fantasy leagues and out there in 64% of fantasy leagues. If you're in deeper leagues, Will Levis I have as a sleeper option this week. So that's a few quarterbacks I have as sleepers for week 11 of the fantasy football season.